All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a huge academic brawl that's been going on for more than a century, all about one of the most important books in the world. And it all comes down to one pretty unsettling question. After 2,000 years, how do we actually know we have the right words?
Okay, so for most modern scholars, the starting point feels like total common sense. If you want to find the original version of any ancient text, you find the oldest copies you can. It just makes sense, right? The less time that's passed, the fewer mistakes can sneak in. But what if that common sense rule is completely backward? What if the oldest copies survived for a really, really bad reason? That one question just blows the lid off a massive debate because it flips the whole idea on its head and challenges the very way we think about ancient texts. So to really get this other side of the story, you gotta meet the guy who basically stepped into the ring to fight for it. A 19th century scholar named Dean John William Burgon. He saw this oldest is best idea taking over and decided, nope, not on my watch. And he brought some serious academic firepower to the fight. So here was his core argument, and at the time, it was pretty wild. He said that just because a manuscript is really, really old doesn't automatically mean it's right. Think about it. It's totally possible for a copy to be ancient and also just plain wrong. So how did he even begin to prove that? Well, where do you start an investigation like this? Burgon's first move was brilliant. He took the other side's star witnesses, the oldest manuscripts themselves, and turned them against the prosecution. Okay, so check this out. The two manuscripts that everyone was holding up as the oldest and best, Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus, had a huge problem. Burgon pointed out that they didn't just disagree with other manuscripts. They disagreed with each other a lot. We're talking thousands of times in just the four Gospels. And this led Burgon to ask this devastatingly simple question. If your two star witnesses can't even get their stories straight with each other, how in the world can you use them as the gold standard to correct the thousands of other manuscripts that actually do agree? So he came up with this idea called the depository theory. He said, maybe there's a reason these copies survived so long and in such good shape. It's because the early church knew they were bad. Think of it like your favorite t-shirt. You wear it, you wash it, you love it till it falls apart. But that ugly sweater from your aunt, it sits in the closet in perfect condition forever because you never use it. He thought the same was true for manuscripts. So if just checking the date isn't good enough, then what do? Well, Burgon argued that you need a much bigger toolkit. And that brings us to his second big clue in this whole investigation. Instead of one simple rule, he laid out these 7 notes of truth. He said you have to weigh all the evidence. Yeah, antiquity is important, but he made a key distinction. It's not about how old the paper is, it's about how old the reading is. But then you also have to look at the sheer number of manuscripts, if they're found in different places all over the world, how reliable they are, and so on. It's the whole picture, not just one piece of it. And here's the kicker. When Burgon actually applied these 7 tests, he came to a shocking conclusion. The text behind the King James Version, sure, it might lose the oldest piece of paper contest. But on the other 6 tests, especially things like the overwhelming number of copies and their continuous use by the church, it won. And it wasn't even close. But Burgon wasn't done. He had a trump card up his sleeve, and this clue came from a place completely outside of any Bible manuscript. This is where you really see the depth of his research. So, remember the biggest criticism of the King James text. The argument you always hear is that it's based on manuscripts from the Middle Ages, way later than Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. That's always been the main attack. To answer this, Burgon and his team took on this absolutely massive project. They went through all the writings of the earliest Christian leaders they could find, and they counted every single time they quoted the Bible. And they came up with this number, just over 86,000 of them. So what are these? They're called patristic citations. These are just quotes from the Bible found in sermons, letters, you name it, from church leaders writing way back in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. We're talking hundreds of years before those oldest complete manuscripts were even made. And here is the absolute bombshell. Burgon showed that these super early quotes overwhelmingly matched the readings found in these so-called late King James manuscripts. What that proved was that the text itself wasn't late at all. It was ancient. It was the version that was being widely used by the church from the very beginning. So for Burgon, when you put all of this evidence together, the feuding manuscripts, the 7 tests, those 86,000 quotes, it all pointed to a much bigger conclusion about the Bible. This wasn't just some academic puzzle for him. He called this massive family of manuscripts, the one that agrees with the King James, the traditional text. For him, this wasn't just about scholarship. It was about faith. He just couldn't believe that the true words of the Bible could have been lost for 1,500 years. Instead, he argued that the real text was the one that was actively preserved because it was in continuous use by the church. That huge number of manuscripts all agreeing with each other, that wasn't an error. To him, that was evidence of divine preservation.
And that whole idea is captured perfectly in this famous line, which is paraphrased from Burgon. It's a direct shot at the discovery of Codex Sinaiticus, since part of it was literally found in a monastery's wastebasket. His point was crystal clear. The real text was never lost. It was always right there, in the hands of believers.
So let's just boil this whole thing down. To the modern claim oldest is best, Burgon fires back, oldest could just mean a rejected, corrupt copy. To the claim that the KJV is based on late manuscripts, he holds up the Church Fathers and says, the readings are ancient. And to the idea that thousands of manuscripts don't matter, he says, no, that massive agreement is the whole point. And all of this leaves us with the one huge question at the very heart of this debate. What's a better guide to what's authentic? The physical age of a couple of old books that were maybe left on a shelf and never used, or the consistent, continuous testimony of a text that was used and copied by millions of people across entire continents for centuries? It's a question that really forces you to think about what preservation and proof actually mean.